We're ready.
At 6:03, good evening. I'd like to ask the clerk to ask for a roll call.
Committee Member Brock? Committee Member Davis? Committee Member Para? Vice Chair Verville? And Chair Vandenberg. Not for public input on item 2. No.
That's okay. Good evening. Very happy to be here in person to present to you. My name is Subcommittee, I'm the Financial Operations Manager. I am joined tonight by Randall Chow, who is the Financial Reporting Administrator, and Robert Garcia, who is the Financial Reporting. So this year, and unfortunately we don't have it online, but your presentations are in front of you, as is Ryan. This year, the Finance Department thought it would be beneficial to provide the audit subcommittee with a presentation to accompany our staff. This will give us an opportunity to provide some contextual information on audits and financial reporting, highlight the key components of the AFR, and later Randy will provide you with some key numbers and statistics from the financial statements, as well as a brief but important governmental accounting lesson. We will do our presentation, and then we will hand it off to Ryan Domino, our engagement partner from LSL, our independent external auditor, who will provide you with information about the audit and their results. And then after that presentation, we'll be available to questions. So if we look at slide 2, why does the city need an audit and financial statements? The most important thing is that it's part of our city charter. It's also a best practice, and it is a best practice because it promotes accountability and transparency. And it is required for borrowing and receiving funding. A lender or grantor wants to understand an entity's financial position before giving them money. And a city in a good financial position will be more likely to receive grant funds, and the AAA bond rating will allow the city to borrow money more quickly. So, look at the next slide. Who are the statements for? Now, this list is not comprehensive nor in order of importance. It includes rating agencies, grantors, investors, other agencies such as the State Controller's Office. They all review the city's AFR. This document is also made available to the public, which of course includes residents, business owners, and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board notes, and I will talk about GASB a little bit later as well, that users of the financial statements is responsible for obtaining a reasonable understanding of government and public finance activities and of the fundamentals of governmental financial reporting. So what does that mean? That these financial statements are really meant for experienced financial statement readers. For those without that level of knowledge, the financial statements can be very confusing to read. If you look at slide number 4, the standards for the financial statements. So who sets the standards? GASB is the authoritative agency by which the city complies. They set the standards governing the content of the AFR. GASB is an arm of the Financial Accounting Foundation, which which also administers the Financial Accounting Standards Board, the FASB, that establishes the accounting standards for private companies. GASB develops the statements that the city is required to implement, such as GASB statement number 87, leases, that the city implemented this last year. As soon as we implement one, another one is right behind it, such as GASB 96, which will require us to do something similar to our lease reporting, but this time for subscription-based technology. GFOA's mission is to advance excellence in public finance. Their certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting, which the city has received consecutively for over 30 years, requires that the city provide a lot of additional information to encourage transparency and full disclosure. The goal is that the users of the financial statements will have the information necessary to assess the financial health of the city. You might not find this, I find this, but this is a fun fact. GASB contends that these new requirements that it issues every year make the reports more comprehensive and easier to understand and use. However, GFOA has recently been asking its members and other power users to comment on the complexity of GASB standards and ask if GASB's quest for transparency and accuracy is actually creating financial statements that are so difficult to comprehend and take so long to complete that the information is not as useful or timely as it could be. This discussion is ongoing, and the one thing that we can be sure of is that change is inevitable. The next slide. All right. There are important narratives, and I want to explain what they mean. So there's two letters at the beginning of the alphabet. The letter of transmittal, also known as the LOT, and the management, discussion, and analysis, the MD&A. These two documents combined act as the sort of footnotes of the financial statements. If you were to read just these two narratives, it would provide you with a pretty clear overview of the city's financial position. The LOT looks forward. It might provide some historical information, but within the context of looking forward to the month since the year end, so in this case, June 30th, 2022, and beyond. And the MD&A is a very prescribed document. It describes the previous year's results as a key factor influencing them. Variances are presented in dollar amounts and percentages with high-level explanation and shows the entity's current financial condition. In addition to those, there are three letters that come from the auditor. The opinion letter is in the after and expresses the opinion of the auditor. And then there were also two letters that were attached to the staff report that you received. The independent auditor's communication to council and the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. I know that second letter is very long. These are required letters, and the combination of these three letters provides you with an overview of the results of the audit. The next slide shows you the sections of the financial statement. So this is an overview of the different sections. Different statements require different presentations and may utilize different terms and accounting methods. Although it can be confusing, it is all required reporting for GASB. I will talk in a minute about the citywide and the fund financials, but I wanted to go over the last four categories. Many of the notes and the content within the notes are prescribed. The city does have latitude to include additional information if it determines that information will be useful to users. Some of the GASB statements require complex reporting elements to be included in the notes. These are very dense and filled with lots of information. There are notes on capital assets, notes receivable, pension note upcoming commitments, and many more. The newest GASB statement on leases also required a note disclosure, and you can review that on page 37 of the act. Required supplemental information includes budget versus actual schedules and required pension and OPEB reporting. Supplementary information is where you can see non-major funds presented individually. And state staff tables, while unaudited, are required by GASB, and GFOA requires an additional level for the city in order to receive the award. The next slide on citywide statements. The citywide statements are on pages 1 and 2 of the app. This is the city's position as of June 30th, 2022, and the day after these numbers start to change. Citywide combines all the city's funds and activities and places them into two types, governmental and business type. To give you an idea about these categories, governmental type includes public safety, community service, and a lot of the staff that are sitting here. Business type includes water, wastewater, RRR, and transit services, etc. I mentioned before full accrual. What does this really mean? This includes long-term assets and the one place where you will see some of the city's substantial capital assets. Any assets funded with governmental funds, such as they're paid for from the general fund, miscellaneous grants, special revenue source fund. This is the only place you will see those assets. However, it also includes the city's substantial long-term liabilities. Now, these are liabilities that will be paid through many future fiscal periods and will be paid with future years' revenues. But the full amount of what will be paid in future years appears on these citywide financial statements. So it's a little bit like if you were going to look at, if I were full accrual, you would see my balance in my bank account, but you would also see my entire 30-year mortgage if I was at the beginning of a large mortgage. So that's kind of similar to how the citywides are. Next, I'd like to go to the slide, fund statements. Each of the city's funds are reported separately somewhere in the financial statements. Now, each fund is either a major or a non-major fund. Now, the city can make a decision to make any fund a major fund. We believe that there's a benefit for reporting it separately. However, there is a detailed calculation that determines those funds that must be reported as major funds. These funds undergo a more stringent audit by the auditors and are reported individually in the financial section of the AFR. Non-major funds are also reported separately, but they're in the supplementary section, which is towards the back of the AFR. The most important major fund is the general fund, which is the main operating fund of the city and includes the city's core government services, such as public safety, community programs, park and tree maintenance, the staff attending tonight, street paving and maintenance, etc. The general fund can be spent on other funds, but other funds cannot be spent on just anything. They have restrictions for a variety of reasons that limit what they can be used for. Each fund must be reported separately with an emphasis on accountability and transparency, not profitability. Similar to, again, kind of bringing it back to personal, if you have multiple bank accounts, you would want to account for them separately. We have one checkbook for one account and another checkbook for another. You would want to reconcile those separately. Some statements are also broken down into three different types of statements. Governmental, proprietary, which includes enterprise and internal service funds, and fiduciary funds. The enterprise funds are self-supporting funds, like the BBB. And fees are charged to users for goods or services. And the idea is that these fees and other funds will be able to pay for their own expenses. And then the internal service funds are funds that provide services to other funds of the city. And then those funds reimburse the internal service funds for what they use or the services they receive, such as ISC or fleet. And at this point, we'll hand it over to Randy.
Thanks, Kenny. As Stephanie mentioned, we use funding having to account for the city's different activities. There are two primary types of funds. Governmental funds, which use what's called modified accrual accounts. The general fund is our primary fund in a good portion of the city's operations. The focus of governmental funds is to provide the maintenance and of the city's operations and the residents' well-being. The general fund derives most of its revenues from non-exchange transactions, such as taxes, sales and use, transient occupancy, property, and parking. The reason it's called non-exchange is that you pay your tax in, but you don't get any specific thing back from paying your tax. Most of the taxes are general purpose funds, which have no restrictions. Other funds are used to keep track of different activities, like housing and grants, and sometimes the source of the revenue, for example, the grantors, require us to separately account for their activities. Modified accrual focuses on near-term assets and liabilities. So capital assets or long-term debt is not reported. Instead, capital assets are expensed when purchased, and proceeds from debt offerings are recognized as income. As such, debt service payments are recognized as an expenditure. Typically, cash needs to be used in order for an expenditure to be recorded. And then revenues must be received within 60 days of year-end to be recognized. The other types of funds, the primary type of funds that we have are proprietary funds. And proprietary funds use what's called full accrual accounting, is what you're used to seeing at publicly held companies like General Motors. Proprietary funds charge a fee for a good or service, which is called an exchange transaction. So, for instance, you pay your utility bill so that you can get water, refuse pickup, and wastewater service. Proprietary funds do report capital assets and long-term liabilities. Cash does not need to be used in order to report expenses. An example would be depreciation or amortization, which are non-cash items. Go to the next slide. We're going to go through a couple of highlights in the financial statements. So for the citywide debt position, which is sort of like a consolidated financial statement for all the city's funds combined, total assets were 1.5 billion greater than total liabilities, an increase of $111 million. We had $1.2 billion net investment in capital assets, which is the capital assets less the related debt in order to fund those capital assets. We had $262 million in restricted net position, which the restrictions usually come from whoever provides us with money, the developer agreement, where the developer says, okay, well, I'm going to give this developer fee, but you have to use a portion of it for transportation or for build out of utilities or improvement of the road in front of my that particular development. And then we had $90 million in what's called unrestricted. Those can generally be used for any purpose. But for the city's fiscal policy, a lot of these monies need to be set aside for reserves in the utility. We had net capital assets increase of $31 million to $1.4 billion. And then we have an increase in long-term debt of $155 million to $331 million. You want to go to the next slide, please? So let's kind of look at what brought about those changes in position. Capital assets increase primarily due to the completion of some water projects that we have in the works. Long-term debt increase because we have two bond issues, one $64.8 million for the city yards bonds, and one $70.5 million to fund water enterprise projects. Revenues increased. Charges for services went up $18 million as parking began to rebound. Sales and use taxes went up $12 million as businesses reopened after pandemic closures. Transient occupancy million, because of CalPERS exceptional return on their portfolio. But as we know, the returns turn negative in the subsequent year. So if you flip to the next page, we can talk about the pension liability reporting. Between 21 and 20, fiscal 21 and 22, the net pension liability, sorry, between 21 and 22, the net pension liability decreased from 481 million to 231 million. And that was primarily due to CalPERS 21.3% return on the portfolio assets. So if you look at the funded ratio on the far right column, you can see that the funded ratio went from 77% to 89% between the 2 years. We've already received our information to produce the 2023 financial statements and the pension reporting, and it's, of course, there were negative returns of 6.1% in the portfolio, which decreased our funded ratio again. If you look at that highlighted column on the right, the funded ratio is going back down to 78% in 2023. Additionally, because of the 21.3% return, CalPERS is reducing their discount rate from 7.0% to 6.8%. That in itself will cause the pension liability to increase because of the lower discount rate. Key factors in the general fund. I'm sorry, next slide. We had an ending fund balance in the general fund of $209.9 million, which is an increase of $28.7 million. Revenues increased by $80.1 million. Again, sales and use tax increased by 19.3%. Transient occupancy tax increased by 222%. And license and permits increased by 35.5%, primarily because of recovery in parking revenues. Expenditures increased by 17.5 million, or 4.8%. And the facility and sales tax agreement payments, small rebuilding of the capital program, and additional parking costs for recovery and parking revenues. The financial statements also reflect the analysis of budget to actual reporting. So let's look at that. In the general fund, actual revenues of $405.5 million were $21.4 million more than the $384 million final budget. All signs of initial economic recovery. Again, transient occupancy tax, actual by 10 million. Local taxes, parking, cancer, parcel, exceeded budget by 6.1 million. License and permit exceeded by 3.2 million. And charge service exceeded budget by 4 million. Operating budget and actual expenditure by 359 million each. This is up versus actual expenditures of 407.7 million, or 13.4 million less than the 412 million final budget. This is mostly due to how we budget capital assets, where both budget multiple years capital assets, but the expenditure will only be for that 1 year. Next slide. Significant transactions that occurred in 21-22. Again, as Stephanie mentioned, we implemented GASB 87 for leases. And this is the GASB that requires leases to be reported as financing transactions. For the accounting groups like me, it's very close to how capital leases used to be reported. The city, as lessor, established a receivable for the discounted future lease payments on the balance sheet. And the net effect of implementing the GASB was about a $4 million increase in net position fund balance. Another item that happened during the year was the FAA directed the city to write off loans between the general fund and the airport fund. So we had to write off $5 million of loans immediately in the 21-22 year, and that was reported as an extraordinary item. An extraordinary item is unusual and frequently they directed us to do this. It was beyond our control. Additionally, in future years, the city is going to have to pay back the airport approximately $7 million. And finally, there was a $56 million transfer made from the general fund to the self-insurance fund to fund some legal settlements.
So I'll wrap things up. The work to close the fiscal year, assemble the documents for the audit, and prepare the financial statements begins every year on July 1st. And it lasts until the last few flyers report is complete and filed. There are 5 reports that are prepared as part of the audit, and an additional 5 reports for the state controller's office, as well as other required reports. While the production of the financials are a citywide effort, it is led by financial reporting, including the leadership of Randy and Robert, and the names that are listed on that slide. It's not just their work for year end and for the audit, but really their year-round diligence monitoring the city's transaction on a daily basis that results in our unmodified opinion year after year. And so I'd like to thank the financial reporting staff for all their hard work. And I'll hand it over now to Ryan Domino.
Good evening. Many of you already, but my name is Ryan Domino. I'm the audit partner with LSL CPAs, the independent auditors for the state of Santa Monica. First of all, pick up by saying I'm sorry if you're getting, I consider myself, I like to say this joke, if you're getting great value versus brand. I'm actually picking up after one of our partners who had worked with the city for a number of years retired at the end of last year, so I am filling in for her pretty much, but happy to be working with the city. I've worked with the city for about 3 years now in a number of capacities, but first year as the audit partner. So just a little bit of my presentation is going to cover what the audit is, what we did, what we found, and what the results were. I also have a few slides in here that kind of go over some financial highlights, so I'll kind of gloss over those since Stephanie and Brandy covered most of them already. But in short, we've been engaged by the city to perform the financial audit for fiscal year 21-22, and we conducted it over the last year, over 4 weeks. So we break our audit into 2 phases. The first phase is our interim phase. This is when we evaluate policies and procedures and internal controls at the city over financial reporting. Basically, we want to make sure that the processes and controls are in place to make sure that the final numbers that will be generated are accurate and can be relied upon. So we conducted that phase of our audit the weeks of April 25th and May 2nd. Then we do what we call our final audit. This is probably what most people think about as the audit itself. We dive into the numbers, we pull supporting documents, we send confirmations out, and we really validate the amounts and transactions that are represented in the financial statements. So the final audit was conducted again over 2 weeks, September 19th and 26th. And the whole goal of a financial audit is to render an opinion as to whether or not the financial statements that are prepared by management are accurate and reliable and basically can be used for reporting to various grantors and bond agencies so that they can have that assurance that the numbers that they're getting is correct. Next slide. One of the things I always like to do in these presentations is dispel a couple of common myths that are out there regarding what an audit is. So there are 2 big ones that I often heard. Is that an audit is I'm going in there and I'm looking into the nail process. That is not necessarily the case. So as part of our audit, we are required to be aware of the risk of the product. We're required to ask about it. We're required to basically keep our eyes open if we see anything while we're doing our audit procedures that we need to do. But it's not the unless we have significant reason to believe that within 12 months of our audit opinion date, the city is going to, or organization is going to enter the license. So unless we have a situation like that, we don't report on the financial health. So, this is the letter that was earlier as part of the ACRA document. It's a 3-page letter. It pretty much explains kind of what I'm saying here, but the most important thing is it's unmodified. That's the highest and best opinion that the profession basically means that everything is material correct and after so we rendered that opinion, and we included the audit on February 9th. We conducted our audit in accordance with 2 sets of standards. The first one is generally accepted auditing standards, and this is the auditing standard that is required of every auditor in every firm in every industry. It's kind of the baseline of auditing standards. But because the city is a local government, we're also required to follow government auditing standards, which is a higher level of requirement that we have to do. It involves not only testing numbers, but we have to test compliance with laws, regulations, grant agreements, bond covenants, a number of significant contracts, things like that, making sure that not only are the numbers correct, but the city is in compliance with these important items. So, because of government auditing standards, we have that really long report that Stephanie referenced earlier with the mouthful of a name. That is the government auditing standard. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of talk a little bit about what my responsibilities are as the auditor, and that is to obtain reasonable and not absolute assurance on the financial statements. What that means is I don't test 100% of the transactions. In a city the size of Santa Monica, complexity there, I still be auditing the financial statements from June 30, 2021, probably. There's a massive amount of transactions. So professional standards allows us to, instead of testing 100% of everything, we use statistical sampling methodologies. We develop an expectation and materiality threshold to determine which transactions to test. We also utilize professional judgment. We're looking through transactions. If something jumps out at us, we'll test it. We also identify risks and material misstatement as part of our audit planning procedures. So during that interim phase, we look at all the transaction cycles, policy, procedures, and controls. And if something appears to be, let's say, a weaker control, we'll spend more time auditing those numbers here to make sure that they are correct. We also evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies and estimates. So if there's any estimates used by management in creating numbers, we have to make sure that they're reasonable. And then also the accounting policies, making sure that they're in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, the GASB pronouncements, and those items. And then finally, I touched on this a little bit earlier. We do evaluate the city for a going concern data, which basically is, do we think the city will continue to be financially viable in the next 12 months? My next slide, a couple of slides here are a couple of financial highlights that I generally like to do in these presentations. The first one is about the general fund unassigned fund balance. So the unassigned fund balance in the general fund is basically funding there that can be spent on any purpose. And the GMOA has a best practice that of that unassigned fund balance, you want it to be at least 2 months of your operating expenditures. So for the city of Santa Monica, that amount would approximately be about $31.7 million, represents about 2 months of operating expenditures. And the unassigned fund balance at June 30th was $39.8 million. So it does meet the GFOA's best practice, which was a good sign for us. As Randy mentioned previously, general fund expenditures did come in under budget, primarily due to capital projects being constructed over numerous years. pension liabilities. I don't think I've ever not had a question or two on these. But the net pension liability for fiscal year 22 decreased $250 million from previous year down to $231 million. This was due to really extraordinarily favorable 2021 investment earnings by CalPERS. And there's a timing difference between when CalPERS reports pension liability and when it gets reported on the city's books. There's a 1 year time delay. So the extraordinary investment losses that CalPERS incurred in 2022 will be reflected in the 2023 report. So even though the pension liability went down in this year's financial statement, we do expect it to go. It's already gone back up. The next item that's usually of interest is the net other post-employment benefits liability. For the year ended June 30, 2022, it was about $31.5 million. It did decrease about $8.7 million from the previous year. And this was primarily due to changes in the assumptions used by the actuarial firm in calculating the liability, and also the city resumed pre-funding contributions during fiscal year 2022, allowing them to go higher discount rate. So a lot of these pension and other post-employment benefits liabilities are actuarially determined. So there's either CalPERS actuaries or actuaries hired by the city calculates and estimates what that liability is. And then finally, the city's contributions to both the pension and OPEB plan are expected to continue to increase in the coming years as CalPERS continues to reduce the discount rate, which more or less, not accurately, but more or less corresponds with their investment returns. All right, which brings me to my final two reports that are included in the packet. The first one is the report on internal control and compliance. It has a really long name, but we just call it the report on internal control and compliance. This is one that's required by government auditing standards, and the purpose of it is to report on any sort of deficiencies in internal control or non-compliance with laws, regulations, grants, bonds, things like that. And I'm pleased to report that for fiscal year 22, we had no such findings, no internal control deficiencies were noted, and we had no non-compliance findings. So moving to the next slide. The final communication as part of your packet is what we call the auditor communication letter. You have an accounting background, you might notice the SAS 114 letter. Pretty much it just is a written communication of this presentation. It talks about significant accounting practices. So for this year, the three highlights is just the change in accounting principles related to the implementation of GASB 87, which changed police accounting. And then we have the significant estimates used by our management or the pension and OPEB liabilities. And then the other item that was discussed in the significant accounting practices is just a discussion of the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and the federal emergency funding being used to mitigate those effects. During the year, we had just no unusual transactions to report, but we did have two significant ones, primarily related to the issuance of those new bonds that Randy previously mentioned. And we had no difficulties performing our audit. We had no misstatements in the numbers or disagreements with management. So it was a very good clean audit year again. So that really does conclude my presentation. Just in summary, we had an unmodified ticket. Again, that's the best opinion we can render. It's clean. We have no internal control findings, no non-compliance findings, no adjustments, and no difficulties conducting our audit. So, great year. I want to just thank Stephanie and Gigi and staff for all their assistance in getting us the documents we needed to complete the audit, the cooperation during this process. I know it's not fun to be
presentation. Moving on to speakers. I see that we have one speaker, Denise Martin.
That I don't know. We've never had public input in person. I have, yeah. Oh, but yeah, it's recording on here. That is all.
We'll be moving on to discussion questions of second and comments.
Normally you could restate just one year back, except there's new guys be coming out and I think next year, they're gonna want you to restate, if you show a 10-year schedule, you'll have to restate all 10 years, if it's practical to do so. So normally, if you, like the city only shows 1 year, you can only restate your beginning fund balance or beginning deposition for that year. Other governments that show comparative statements, they would have to restate not only the current year, but also the prior year. It really just depends on how many prior periods are shown. But with the new standard coming out next year, they're going to get everyone on the same page. So as far as the way it would look is, so in your statistical sections in the back would have the 10 information. You're going to just have to go back and correct all those columns. It does allow you to not do it if it's not feasible to do. Like if the data is not available to restate those previous years, you don't have to do it. So they just want you to just go back as far as it's reasonable to do so for the data is available. But it won't ever exceed more than 10 years because you're only required to show the 10 years.
Okay, so I have a question. So, do you ever issue a management letter? Is that something that's still being issued to certain entities? You describe what a management letter is to or
Yeah, there's others are commonly so we are required to do a what few management letters. We use the management letter as something separate than the required staff's 115 letter. So a management letter, if we were to issue one, would be for items that did not necessarily rise to the level of a internal control finding or non-compliance finding. It's really more of a, we use it as a recommendation for best practices. So we don't always issue them. It's on a case-by-case basis. As we do issue the stats 115, which is the required reporting, but the informal, we call it the informal management letter, is just if we find something that, oh, you know what, you're, reconciling a bank account in this manner, it's really not the best way to do it, recommend you just do it this way. Those items.
Who do you provide that to?
Normally we provide it to, it would be the city manager in most cases, or whomever they would like it directed to. For most of our clients, we do direct it to city manager.
Would we have a copy if you were doing that? And now I just have a quick one on, did you do any on-site visits this year, or was that not part of your?
So this year, normally we only do on-site visits, we inspect and control. Right now, cycles every 2 years. The nature of governmental inventory is different from like a private sector business where it's not a huge, necessarily critical line item. We are scheduled to probably come back and do a physical inspection this year, but this past year we did not do any on-site work.
All right, so you'll be coming this year.
Yes.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, on earlier presentation, I saw you talk about proprietary funds, the big blue bus was used as an example. The big blue bus, has the 22 states in Michigan big blue bus?
Yes, and I have been most of them.
Okay. So looking at 21 states, only 27% of the revenue is actually operating. What's the rest? Is there a threshold at which you can cease to charge your price line if it becomes more of a government effective fund? What's the threshold?
There is no threshold because the big blue bus is reported as an enterprise fund, but because of GST. The agency does not, it's, you're lucky to get 20% of the operating expense covered by fares, and the rest is all covered by subsidies.
Well, I mean, BART is almost 80%, right? So it depends on the different. Okay. And that's all I have for that question.
Anybody else?
I have.
So, we did talk to Ryan about this. So, notes receivable. We see it on the financial statement position, deposition, it's part of the balance sheet, it's part of receivables. And, we see on the detail down to the fund level, we see 39 notes that say we have interest rates, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But the reality is that still is not clear to me, certainly, that the $208 million that we have in notes receivable is ever going to come to us, because those are from loans. And in talking to you, can you help describe notes receivable and how we represent it and how it's being shown as an asset? But I continue to have problems seeing that as an asset.
Sure. So, notes receivable is kind of reported as money that's loaned out to typically the state construction of housing projects.
We don't have any other types of notes receivable. That's it.
There's, and so when the money's loaned out, it's loaned out under, in most cases, under the assumption that it'll get repaid at some point. So that's why it's recorded as a long-term receivable. For instances where you know it's not going to get repaid or something like that, that an allowance for doubtful accounts is usually calculated to completely offset that receivable balance. And so even though it's being tracked in the general ledger, it's not necessarily going to show up on the financial statement because it's really a zero balance account. The notes that are on the financial statements are the ones that are not fully allowed for. There is some level of expectation of flexibility at the end of the term.
So, I guess what my question is how can you create more transparency? Because it took talking to the engagement audit partner for us to those. Partially. I think we still consider it partially. And I guess my question is, I don't think that's required by Gatsby. I don't think it's required by any other, things we have. But is there something we can do to continue to provide more transparency around that shows up as an asset, but actually has a significant amount of net to it, where it's sitting out? And then I still don't know it's $208 million. Where, how do we know we're going to collect it? For that. But I continue to not have visibility that I would like to be able to understand.
So the 208, I'll defer to staff to answer that question. But for what I've seen other cities do for their notes receivable, a lot of times they'll, even if it's not one that they will expect to fully collect, they'll put a little word in there in the note disclosure or some in their disclosure explaining this is the gross amount of the receivables we have, and this is the allowance for doubtful accounts that we've offset on. So that's what I've seen other entities do. It's probably a good practice.
Do they do it note by note, or is it a lump?
It would just be a lump sum. Because a lot of times there's hundreds of these types of transactions, and you would have a 200-page note disclosure, which is a lot of cases.
So I guess on the $208 million, can we provide more transparency on what the percentage of those that we think we're going to collect, as well as the 100% allowance
For each individual one?
No, I'm good with,
Yes.
Just understanding that we got this much, that's 100% allowance, the actual counts, and this amount that's got partial.
Sure.
Okay, well, this is very detailed, but yeah, if you look at, on page 1 of the,
Page 40 of the, that's where the note for the notes receivable
Right.
you can actually see it all.
but if you just look at your statement of debt position on page 1, you'll see something called notes, note 4, and it's got $208 million, $650 million. And those are notes receivable for housing. And what isn't shown is that part of these notes already have an allowance for doubtful accounts. If you look at the top line, it says net allowance for doubtful accounts, which I completely missed on. So we're just trying to understand how to get more transparency.
I got a question. So, given the triviality of the notes, my understanding is that and this is probably not totally right, because the 208 is the net amount in the financial statements. Now, my understanding is that there's about 177 million that's been completely reserved for, and is not under the financial statements. So that would be 385 million notes. But 385 is understated because the 208 is a net number, not a gross number. 177, I think, is a gross one. I'm not even sure about that. So I think the disclosure around this material is kind of critical. And I think one of the issues is that in the notes, you list who the note is going to, right? So there's all of the community agency, right? And so it gives the impression that that's the total amount that these vendors have basically given the total amount of receivables for these vendors. But that's not the case because there's an entire amount of notes that are not being disclosed and have been fully allowed. So one of my concerns is that it's perhaps giving an inaccurate picture of the vendor status as regards to this financing facilities in the private estate. And so I think my concern is that disclosure about that. You know, I understand the gross concept that you had. You say that the total amount of the notes would be disclosed, right? The total amount of the allowance. But given the amount, given the materiality by the vendor, it would also, I think, be extraordinarily helpful to the readers of the financial statements to understand in total how much has been, how much is reported against these different vendors. Now, I'm assuming that these notes, what we're talking about is notes that have not yet matured. Once a note is matured, it's gone, it's gone. Right? So everything that we're talking about, the stuff that's on the financials, the stuff that's not on the financials, that is all not matured notes. However, some of them have been fully allowed. Okay. So that kind of disclosure to me is very important for a reader of these financial statements, especially since we are listing vendors on the existing notes. Second question is the allowances taken on these notes. Where are they recorded? In our tax separately in the different fund statements, there are allowances for is that write-off classified as an expense, like an operating expense, or is it a non-cash? Is it separate? I guess if I can't type in the financials, it doesn't matter. It would have been an expense at the time of issuance or the time of allowance fully allowed. No, not necessarily, because we see notes in the 208 million that are partially allowed for. So there's somewhere there's an expense going out. So we have notes that have never been on the balance sheet and that have been fully expensed from day one.
Theoretically, they're on the balance sheet, that's well not.
Makes it even more important, I think, that we understand the vendor breakdown of the entire balance sheet, you know, the face amount. Because that's kind of sounds a bit obscure area that we hide, not hide, but it makes it very difficult to understand what the actual status of these notes are.
So the actual loan documents make it clear that these are forgivable loans.
Right, but okay, but the point though is that we're calling them loans, and they're almost like rents at this point.
I think it's accurate what the issue is. I'm trying to find some solution. I would like to have discussion
Well, yeah.
about what we can do to make this.
So are you asking to look at every single?
No, what I'm saying is this. Number one, it seems that we should have the face value somewhere disclosed of all of these non-mature loans. Because even when I add this up, it's understating things, because the 177 may be 100% because they're immediate switch offs. But the 208 is the net number, and it's not the gross number. So even that's understated. So we don't actually know the total amount of the notes receivable in the city's books at all, even looking at the financial statements. And even knowing what 177 million will basically recall. So the disclosures in the financials really don't give us much of an insight. I mean, the 280 million is 151% of 385 million. And it's smaller than that. If in fact that 385 is large enough. So from a disclosure perspective, I think it's a very important area that needs a lot more visibility. Not necessarily on a by note basis. I think maybe the levels of the notes that we have today are fine. But I Number one. Number two, I was looking through the statements where they describe the accounting, the notes, the accounting policies. And I didn't see anything discussed. Maybe I just missed it. Is there something that discusses the criteria for writing off notes and criteria for the allowances?
I know that when there are allowances and the low dots, and work with housing, each of these loans, at that point, right.
Okay, I'm saying so, but there's nothing mentioned about any of this in the accounting.
So is that something that you've ever seen in a note one is a description of these housing loans and how they're written on?
Or at least a general description of the accounting rules that are applied to the numbers that we're seeing in the financial statements.
Probably what I've seen in other cities is a disclosure of receivables in general, not necessarily notes, and they'll just have receivables. This is our policy for, receivables are shown as collected or something like that. I've rarely seen any specific policies that don't want related to notes and receivables.
Do those cities have the same materiality as we do?
I have a few,
Okay.
but you have very similar accounts.
Well, I personally would like to see an explanation in general. Because again, to me, it's not transparent. So, can we finish? I mean, I'd like to just try to conclude this to saying, we'd like to see more transparency in this notes receivable area if possible, especially regarding the notes allowance for 100% write-off, as well as the partial percentage, whatever that would be, and see that on an annual basis with, if it makes sense, put it in there. But I have no GASB expert in that. My next question is going to go, how do we talk to GASB, simplify it? But, I mean, I think for visibility and understandability of this note, it still looks to me that, we're going to collect, and it just doesn't clear me out.
Well, to your point, I went through the financials back to fiscal year 10. There's $10 million on the current financials that go all the way back to fiscal year 10 that have never changed. The balances have never changed. So they haven't received 50 on any of these loans. And that's $10 million. And back to FY16, when you add the numbers, the balances that haven't changed from FY16, and you add that to the FY10 numbers, you're at $40 million, right? So it's material.
So we've explained ourselves, we've read the city attorney's notes, so we're still trying to figure out what that means, but we have talked to the auditor, and we just have felt encouraged that there's possibility that working with the city, more transparency. Again,
Would it make sense to have a motion to suggest the council, since that is my reading or new process or the existing process that was not?
at this point, I don't know that our comments integrated into this. I think it's better to talk to them and see what we do. I mean, talk to the auditor, talk to the client.
I guess the one thing I'd say is the council doesn't direct the auditor. And we need to be a little careful about that because the auditor in theory is independent and not.
This is not about their auditor, this is about their existing staff.
Well, okay, as long as it's, if it's just about having city staff provide information, then I don't think that needs to be the council.
No, if you read Doug's note, apparently we are unable, my understanding, we are unable to direct the auditors or the staff to do anything, but we have to go through directly to the council.
Yeah,
My
I
understanding.
understood it as we could not change the reports that were given materially.
That's one of the things.
I didn't think it had to do with it, but if you're more comfortable directing it to city staff to the city council to direct that, that's fine.
So then I think a motion would sound something like recommend to the city council that those disclosures recommend the city council that it instructs the city staff to
directing them so detailed is really, I think, what we're saying.
Well, this is my concern, and maybe you can tell me how my concern would be. Basically, this is really technical stuff. And so I don't know how the council, if they're given just a very high level direction, will then translate that into
I agree, but we have the finance people here our discussion, so they're gonna, they understand.
Okay, well, maybe, you know, we have council people here, so.
Can I also bring up an issue? I think that one of the things that we need to consider here is that these are housing trust fund loans, and that we have a whole housing trust fund set of guidelines that is separate. I can't speak to it right now. We have experts in that. That the council has approved for many years. For example, the issue that you talked about with the 10 years, the $10 million over 10 years. A lot of these loans are 55-year loans. That is right. Long-standing loans. So I don't know, I mean, we can take a look at what we can provide further, but I do want to say that there are some other policies that we have to look into and, you know, figure out what reporting is happening potentially in other areas.
Right, but again, this is just disclosure. This is, all I'm talking about here is disclosure. I think the list of, like I said, what we see in the financial percent right now is probably of the total amount that are there. So all I'm saying is that the reader of these financials would think that's almost, you know, they would have no basis to understand that it's probably half or maybe even less than half of all the notes that are out there because of the amortization policies. And there's no detailed discussion of the accounting policy for allowances being taken. And how all of this is going. So from a reader's perspective, the existing list that we have, I think is fine. But what I'm saying is, there should be something that says, this list comprises X, and there's another Y, a number of fixed value of these notes, and total amount on all our total allowance on these is this, and that allowance is basically scattered across all the different funds. I don't know if it has to be more than that. I do think that level of accounting policies and those numbers would be understand the full scope. I mean, ideally, we would also say, out of all these notes, these are the top 5 or 10 vendors, and this is the value of those vendors as you have in these notes. Again, by listing the vendors as you have, it gives the reader the idea that that's it. And that's clearly not at all. So I think that's kind of a blind spot where the readers that really understand what's happening in these financials. I think I should propose a motion to the council, and the motion would read that the council to consider instructing staff to increase the amount of disclosure in the notice the full face value of all the notes received and the full allowance against the $100,000 notes received. And to also disclose in the account, a summary of the accounting and the accounting principles section.
Any other discussion? Okay. You get them, clerk, of the details.
I have it recorded, so I'll get it all.
Full allowance.
Full gross value, full face value of full allowance that has been taken against the full face value. And the allowance, the summary of the allowance of council that are being used by the city. And as far as the vendors, I mean, nice to have the end saying, I don't all agree with the vendors, but I'm not with the vendors.
Okay, any discussion? But I'm hoping you weren't leaving. Sorry, okay. All right, can we have a vote on this motion?
We can do a voice vote since we're in person, unless you would rather do a roll call.
So,
Yes.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Anybody abstain? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that discussion, city staff. I hope you guys are supportive of it. I do have one more question, and that is, can we write a letter to GASB asking them to certify to sit on a university foundation? And we wrote letters, because some of the stuff they have is so ridiculous, I couldn't even comment. So I would very much like to promote the idea that we write a letter to GASB, and I know it currently doesn't mean much. Have you seen any success at all in working against these guys?
And there have been comments made before.
And we try to get cities to put a letter together altogether, it hasn't been effective.
I hope you have a way to try. And I appreciate your perspective.
No, I'm serious, because I think it's ridiculous. I mean, this is, like you said, they're adding time and effort in work. Well, whatever I can do to help.
I just wanted to thank staff and Stephanie, Randy. I'd like to meet you for budget session because your explanations were so fantastic. I did not know this, and so I actually understood. I actually understood your I really love to kind of frame. I wish we had this conversation before I read all this because then I would have been able to look at it with the mind. So I really I am going to, no, I wrote your name down, I got your first one, I took pictures. Oh, you don't do budget? Okay, if you can explain it like they did. No. I was trying to say you have to dumb it down for me because I'm that person. I'm sorry, I just can't. I appreciate it. This is just a different language. We need to receive and file.
I mean, just for the record, probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters either way, but it's recommended. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, that was Committee Member Verville, I'm sorry, and Committee Member Davis, correct? Okay. Yeah, voice vote is fine.
Dallas. I think he was kind of hoping he'd get one more meeting in Zoom. So thank you very much. It was nice meeting you, Ron. And nice meeting you. I'm very thank you. Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. And thank Gigi and Stephanie and all the staff. Moving on to item number 3.
That's me. So after last, the February meeting, you had.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing this year. You put forward a motion to talk about what we could do about.
Somebody did not know what I was doing.
So, and, it gave us an opportunity to, maybe we need to do training, every time we have new people, so that we make it clear how this works. So just, for the record, the the way that we do internal audits, Moss Adams is our internal auditor, as if, it's a staff person, so they are actually what we call the chief audit executive per the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors. The internal auditor goes by the rules of the IIA and also the American Institute of Certified Accountants. That is their contract, those are the guidelines that they follow. And there's also the yellow book that most people have heard of, that's coming out of the GAO. So when we take a look at yes? Oh, the yellow book. The yellow book is. I've heard of the yellow book before. Oh, see, yeah. If you've ever been anywhere near an internal auditor, they love the yellow book. It is literally I want to say it's kind of like, the blue book is for GASB, that every one of these, it's the Bible of internal audit. Any internal auditor basically knows it by heart. Yeah. So, and it's updated. It's basically the guidelines, the guidance that changes every year. It's written by the GAO, so they're kind of the top area. So when we're doing, they have certain things that they take a look at, that they talk about, and I'm just going to pull from the report. One of the things that they say is that the chief audit executive is responsible for reviewing and approving the final engagement communication before issuance and for deciding to whom and how it will be disseminated. The yellow book talks about the fact that we need to be careful, the internal auditor needs to be careful that there is no threat that influences or pressures from sources external to the audit organization, anything that will affect the auditor's ability to make objective payments. So independence is a key thing. When we work with Moss Adams, even when we look at, when we talk to them, there is a clear line from, where we can't say, oh, we don't like this, change that. Otherwise, there's no point. And that actually is one of the really great reasons why it's nice to have an external internal auditor, because they're very objective. Yes.
When you say change, you're talking about the final report or something.
Well, we never can say change. It is what it is. But if if they're saying, okay, here are some preliminary things so that, you want to have the facts right? And we say, no, that's, actually, when we did the fixed assets audit last time, they didn't have the right departments because, that kind of stuff. So anyway, so we believe, or not we believe, what we have here is internal audit guidance that says that there should be kind of there should be separation in what the internal auditor does. The internal audit guidance makes it clear that they should be presenting a final report to anybody, and especially to the governing body, which is, it's this group, but also the city council. And then we go into what our own, because there's a lot of talk about the charter, and the internal audit is not in our charter. But we do have the resolution the council passed that you all have seen, that we update as needed. And in that resolution, it talks about when the audit committee can, what their responsibilities are. And in there, specifically section 9, duties and responsibilities of the resolution talks about the fact that the audit subcommittee's responsibilities, once the report is issued, let me back up. That the audit subcommittee is responsible for reviewing upon completion all audit reports. And then you're able to determine appropriate corrective actions that would be communicated to the council. And again, you can determine, talk about any corrective action, same thing, that is recommended to the council on ensuring that timely and appropriate action has been taken in response to council directions arising from audit reports. And you're also able to advise us, as you do, on what should be in the work plan every year. So these are things that are in the plan. If any of this was to change and you went to council and said, no, we want to, make changes, which would definitely hurt the integrity of the internal audit. It would also, if you were to say that you wanted to look at drafts of reports, we would end up with one internal audit report maybe every 2 years. I mean, these things take a while, so we have limited funds. We want to be able to use those funds as much as, as efficiently as we can to get through more areas. So that would be my concern is if any change were to be suggested. So that's a very worried summary. I think I use more words than I use in the second word. Sorry? Oh, did they? Yeah, that was great. Thank you. They did, but that's okay. So, yes.
No, there are not. You're welcome.
Okay, so discussions and questions from staff. So, I mean, a lot of this pulled up from those,
Well, the piece from related to the bylaws, and the other pieces are research that we've done and that our internal auditor has provided to us as well.
So, I went through all the materials, and I think I have a much better framework now as to how this is kind of working. So, my questions are in two main areas. Number one, let's use the last audit subcommittee and the issue, the motion that, according to this, that motion is null and void. The motion about adding something to that risk analysis project. One of my concerns is that, and I completely get that we don't want them, responding to questions constantly while they're doing the work. One of the things that I don't think I received a satisfactory answer on when I posed the question was, one way to make it smoother is to make sure that we're all on the same page when the project is defined, right? And so I don't recall there ever being a meeting, for example, for the risk project, where we all went through the risk project items and had a chance to basically discuss those and agree the scope of that document before actually going into production. And that to me is something that if we do the work up front, then the rest of this becomes much more, it remains efficient, it remains, independent and everything else, but that everyone has an ability to input on that point. And so that was absent in this risk analysis project.
So, if I can respond, we actually do have a project, that I think falls, you would be advising on the work plan. So that is something that we would be looking at. And when we go through the work plan every year, we discuss this. And I know with Elizabeth, we've had a few times when you've asked for a more thorough engagement scope. Yeah.
More objectives, more scope, more deliverable.
And so that is something that we can do when we work on, when we present the work plan, when we talk to you about it. The work plan is usually presented in May. I don't think you were here in May. Yeah, so that may have been one of the issues. And so, and we, when we talk about the internal audit progress every the status updates that they do, that's an opportunity to ask questions as well. Related to what would be included in the enterprise risk assessment, the auditor heard what you said, and they are taking a look at the budget process. So,
This is just,
that's
the
part of
budget process, most of it is the disclosure, right? In the way the budget is presented, the way that the council agenda items are presented.
They're taking a look at all of that.
Yeah, okay. That's great to hear. One of the things that concerns me though is I remember in December, I think it was my first meeting, in the discussion about the, what do you call it, when you give your overview of where all the projects are? The progress, thank you, thank you.
Painful progress report that
So I had asked about the risk analysis. They said, oh, no, we're going to talk about that in the next meeting. And so I didn't provide any input. And so then after the next meeting came in February, it's like, oh, we're already, the train is on the station. So that's my concern is that there was no, even when it was brought, it was like, this is done at time, it's too early, and then by the time the next meeting came up, it was too late. And maybe that's part of that is a function of only meeting 4 times a year plus special meetings, which is probably another issue by itself. I'm not sure. So that's where I struggle with how do we ensure that we have the input because it does says the ASC reviews the proposals and makes recommendations, but we have to have a forum and these projects so that we can actually do that. So does that process need to be revisited? Does how they come in or how these things are presented in level details so that we have a chance to impact the design of some of this stuff?
I think we can provide you with the scope, and we have provided this committee with the scope of projects before they start.
So does that imply that this risk analysis would have been provided in May of last year?
Yes, but one of the things about the risk analysis is it's a very prescribed, scope that Moss Adams uses. It is, again, because it is something that it's a tool that they use. It's a proprietary tool for them. This is what they use. So it's not so much when they do a risk analysis, it's everything. And based on their risk analysis, and they take an overview of everything. If they find that there is some level of risk in certain areas, they're going to come back and say this is maybe something that we need to look at more. And that's when the deeper analysis comes. Because we're a big city. I mean, we're a small city, but we're a big city.
We're the biggest little city there is.
Yeah. And so there's a lot to do. So they can't go into deep detail on everything for this risk analysis.
No, I completely understand that. I think that, I would not want to materially impact, but I felt very strongly that what I had brought up was a very material issue, and the council is willing to get the full disclosure. And it may not be an issue because it may be just fine, but in my mind, it was something that was very important to look at. So anyway, so I think, so I'm still a little fuzzy on when would the ASC be able to comment on these projects before they launch, so that we have the ability to have that robust discussion.
We would bring the scope of the meeting before they start. So, if we have I think that we could probably, for example, the risk assessment is going to go until August. It'll come back in August. I don't know that they'll be able to start. If there's another project that's going to start before then, they'll bring it in May, and you can take a look at the project scope in May. We'll just try to make sure that we can get there, show it to you before we start. then I think we would be okay. I'm just trying to figure out, like, I don't want to lose funds.
Right, I agree. And rather than lose funds, is there a way that these things can be communicated to the audit subcommittee in between meetings? No, is there a
But
way?
then it's not run, you can't actually talk about it. We can't, we have to take a direction, advice from all of you.
Yeah, okay, so if you can endeavor to basically try to sync that up so that these things don't launch without us actually beginning to look at that and sort of launch it out.
Yeah, we don't have that many projects going on these days, but, yeah, we will do that.
All right.
Just, reading through everything, just wanted to confirm the method of communicating with council from staff. Is it we're shared via writing? Is it in writing, memo? Like how are we, if as a committee, we have, I just wanted,
I assume it's a motion. I mean, I assume it's.
So it's a motion and then it goes.
Motion, we say something like, one of the things we would have said, let's get this discussion, was we want to convey to city council the importance of looking at the financial reporting efficacy of documents to the city council, and would like city council to consider that important. I think that's the only way.
And I have horrible memory, so I'm giving that caveat in advance because outside of recent homeless report from Los Adams, in the last 2.5 years, I don't recall any other times that we've had any reports or messages from this body to council.
So we do the after every year. So that's going on April 11th. So the motion we can make tonight is going to be.
No, I know that. I'm
Right.
sorry.
You mean the other ones?
No, I'm sorry. What I meant to say, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
What I meant to say is, how right now we're getting clarification in terms of how we communicate to council what our desires or direction is. I'm saying in the past, I don't recall ever receiving, as a council member, any direction from this body.
The compensation study went to council. A lot of times the body
There's
is.
a specific direction from them outside of, here you go, here's your report.
And it's, let's see, so, there was a special
There have been
direction.
reports where we've done study sessions on topics, we
Yeah.
incorporate statements from the audit committee to look at it. We did a study session on compensation, and the audit committee looked at that report first and then made comments about it. But I wasn't on that. Yeah, but I'm just saying,
I'm just saying,
It's not relevant on
And
it.
to add to confusion, I thought that all the reports we did, which you've seen in the progress report, we did a lot of reports. I think we've done a lot of reports on internal controls, on divisions, on whole departments, that I always thought was being sent to city council. But I'm sensing now that it hasn't. I never thought it was presented, I thought it was being provided to city council. Because that's what I thought I read in here, is that all the city audit reports would be going to council.
City council, they're public, they're aware of them. For example, the homelessness report was sent to council.
Clearly.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I'm saying, like, we get a lot of reports, we get a lot of emails, we get a lot of, and so things get buried, and so that's why I just wanted to get some kind of, some clarification. Because I mean, the work that this audit committee does, I think is really important, for transparency, for our community, and so, just making sure that whatever conversations, direction, whatever it may be, that comes out of the time that we spent here together, makes its way, to council. I mean, I think it's really important, so.
I think that's something we can talk, because the department has done a great job of putting all the reports on the website.
Right.
So I'm not saying that's how you should get them, but just so you know, from the very beginning, we were clear that we wanted every single report, every progress report, everything we have is out there. So I'm not saying that makes it accessible to most people, because sometimes they can't even
time navigating our city website, so I'm sorry.
I can never find anything on this, yeah, do you as city council and I'm not there to ask that. You want these things sent to you because it's one more email.
But I think that, you know, the chances are I will probably see it a little bit more and be happy to like look for it or write about it, so.
I mean, for communication, I think, I think there are a range of approaches that the council can discuss in terms of how you would want to proceed. For example, I think we could consider every time that the council meeting post an audit subcommittee, that item on the agenda. One of the council members could be designated as a liaison to the audit committee, could be tasked with the responsibility of reporting to the city council about what report you received, what was discussed, what was the recommendations made.
And you can attach, you only have 5 minutes right next to it.
And you can formalize it in so many different ways, but that could be done.
No, but I think that would be, I think that would be.
I mean, we talked about an agenda setting, but I think that's a very straightforward way to provide conduit for the conversation.
I can't speak for all my colleagues, but I think that that would be.
I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you for.
Because I feel like they're very.
No, I mean, it's transparency, right? I mean, it's available in the document, what was discussed.
And I strongly support that, but I worry that you will get all the other subcommittees, commissions who want to have the same type of discussion. So I'm just saying that.
This is an audit, it's a subcommittee of the city council, which the other ones are.
Say that again.
This is the only subcommittee of the city council.
I like the sound of that.
And, other advisory bodies, they will transmit via written communications to council their recommendations, so council receives that.
And the homeless report, yeah, I don't know what to say about it, but anyway, most of them are like smaller chunks. You know, it's like, how do we make this work better in the city, or how do we, get the personnel department to get, updated on some areas it needs to be? And how do we ever get the permitting in residential and small business going? I mean, I'd love to have more discussions about that, but they're a little bit more crunchy, than all this huge sort of compensation stuff. So you can, I think, raise your team. Okay. Please, go ahead.
There was a second part to this, which was comments. Public is, our practice, that's public comments on the nature of comments, they want to say earlier. I was operating under the Brown Act direction that was being given by Doug, which is it can only be done during the meeting. Now, in the guidance, there's a note that says, well, you can submit them 24 hours in advance. Now, the question is, I'm not sure, how does that relate? My first question is, how does that relate to the Brown Act? Who do I submit that to before? Not getting arrested.
I'm happy to answer this question. Sometimes I think if you submit answers questions, just to kind of outline the different ways that you as a vice member.
Right.
Vice chair, can provide your questions in advance. You could provide questions to staff via email, which you've done in the past. You could provide them in the meeting in person, like you've done today in other meetings. Or you can provide them to the city clerk in written form, and have it email, and that will become part of the public comment. And it's up to you to decide what format that you want to do. It's not for us to decide. You have those options.
So any of those three options, right? Number one, you would elicit or should elicit a response from staff, or somebody from the internal auditors, somebody should answer the question, right? I think the city did a decent job of answering the questions to the homelessness study in November. And in fact, it was done in a very timely manner, and it was very, very impressive. So, with the last set of questions for the HSGP study, the questions were submitted and there's been no answers from the city. So there's two issues there. One, I think it's important, I personally think it's important that the public sees the questions, so I would then probably choose the channel that goes to the done in the 24 hours before the meeting, right? According to these new guidelines.
Are you referring to it being made as a public input essentially?
Well, just so that, so when I submitted the questions in the meeting, in the last 2 meetings, there was on the website, it says, oh, you edit, and then my questions get posted.
Right.
I think that should continue. So, but it sounds like you only have a meeting for that to happen, this is sent to you, is that correct? Or to the city clerk?
Well, they, actually, they should be sent to Laura, because Laura's actually the liaison. Laura Perez, over here. Yeah, she's the one who creates the agenda, and she also updates the webpage. Yes. So, yes. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes. No, no, no.
So, let me just say that alternatively, something that we do with council, if the council member has questions, that's what the 24 hours is about. They can give them to us, we do our best to answer them. You know, send it to staff, that answers the council member. If the council member wants to get that question and answer on the record, then you can ask the same question during the meeting, and we'll answer that question on the record as well. So there's also that approach, which creates some dialogue, which is also, you know, can be useful.
One of the things we have to do is the public.
But actually, lots of times, we send questions to staff, and then staff sends the response to everybody.
Right.
Which doesn't really run it, because the idea is that if you have a question, maybe someone else does, or that way everyone has, the idea is that everyone has the same information, so it even wouldn't be a one-on-one dialogue. If you ask Gigi, you know, is the book green or yellow, she could respond to everyone on a subject, the book is green. I think that's okay, because it's coming from staff, it's not subcommittee.
Yeah. To create more, you know, more people understand it better, so that when we're talking about it, there's, you know, more conversation.
Can you do both? Send it to Laura and send it to.
Well, I get everything that Laura does.
Well, I know. But when you send it to Laura, that's to also put it out to the which is hard.
I mean, the public finance.
No, but I mean,
That's not gonna happen.
No.
I mean, we can add, my feeling is, you know, when we put these questions, you know, when we write them down, we post them, that takes a bit of time, as you can see, it takes some time. The answers can come potentially faster if we're just kind of talking to you
But
about it.
I think the answers, especially the homeless study, I think the answers, questions and the answers, and value on top of what the report provided. I think that was important for the public to see. And so therefore, I think that what I'm trying to do is avoid having the back and forth buried in, you know, like the closed email system and not assessment. Because several times, since then, I've been able to direct people to a link and say, that was answered, all you have to do is go over here and see it. It's not public, it's not posted. And the public has no way to access that. And the other thing is, what I was saying is that, you know, the policy study, for example, or the human services study, those are pretty big studies. So while I understand that things have time to answer questions, I think that these are things that are not, you know, these are not things that are happening every single audit meeting, and therefore, you know, they're going to completely derail staff. I think there was a lot of information in the responses to my questions that was, as I said, nowhere in the homeless services, homeless study. so, I think I'm pretty clear now how we proceed. Now, the last questions, my questions for the last study are actually posted on the website. Will I get answers to those? Or is it someone?
Yes.
Someone's turning away about?
They're coming, yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So the answer is the public can't, the best that we can do is get answers, questions on the website a day in advance. Public, and then.
If you want to submit your questions, earlier than the data next, you're free to do so.
But would they get published? Or if it's something that I consider important enough that I would want the public to see, is that something that would get published on the website when I submit it?
I don't know what our publication schedule is for this.
We do our best to get agendas, by the Thursday before Tuesday.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair.
So it would be, does it come up as written comment, or it's a separate item because it's from the audit subcommittee member. I guess it's the way that we've done it in the past.
It's just that, these big reports, if they end up being 24 hours, it takes 2 days to do the report.
Okay, you have to read it first, right?
They're so easy.
I've tried to diagnose this process, and it's not.
I like the dialogue, but the questions make it, the answers and reading the rest of the audit subcommittee.
Where we can. Some of these take some time.
Take the mic down and just bear with it. We're gonna talk to you all and see what we can do. So on that point, are there any other questions on agenda item 3?
I would just like to add as a caveat to when staff emails all the members to let them know so everyone's on the same page. If a member does have a question, just make sure you don't reply all. At that point, you do run into a Brown Act violation. So if you have a particular question, send it directly to that staff member to address. That gets us in trouble all the time. Yeah.
So, I just want to say when you say scope, Gigi, to me, that really is the proposal of the project, and the proposal includes scope, which you can talk more about, but not tonight. But, it could be geographical, it could be divisional, it could be, whatever, temporal. The objectives of that project, and then if we can, the deliverables, and then it'll be more helpful for us to understand on how it goes.
I just want to confirm that we don't need to resubmit to the council a motion from the last meeting on the risk analysis. That is in train with the individual others, and so this does not need to have a separate motion to the council. Okay.
Okay, can I hear a motion to file and receive?
I don't know that we really need to receive and file that. I think that was more just, yeah. Well, just in this case, it was just kind of a FYI. I don't think it's really just. You can if you want to. I think it was just like. Yeah. 7:54.